If you searched Nicole Callahan's name online before the investigation became public, you would not find fear. You would find admiration. Old Facebook comments described her as an inspiration. Former students thanked her for believing in them when nobody else did. Parents called her patient, creative, and devoted to children. At Homeland Park Primary School in Anderson County, South Carolina, Nicole was known as the energetic kindergarten teacher who stayed late to help struggling students. At Project Challenge Playhouse, she became the passionate theater director who helped shy teenagers gain confidence under stage lights. To many families, she represented safety. That is what makes this story so disturbing. Because according to investigators, behind the image of a trusted educator was someone accused of systematically grooming a teenage boy for years while hiding in plain sight. And perhaps the most uncomfortable part of all is this. Many of the warning signs were visible long before anyone called the police. They were simply interpreted differently because Nicole Callahan was a woman. For years, society has conditioned people to imagine predators in a very specific way: older man, young girl, authority figure, abusing power. But the allegations against Nicole forced many people to confront a reality they were not emotionally prepared to discuss. What happens when the trusted teacher is female? What happens when the victim is a teenage boy? And what happens when society mistakes manipulation for kindness simply because it comes wrapped in a nurturing personality? Those questions now sit at the center of one of South Carolina's most controversial criminal investigations. According to prosecutors, Nicole first met Grant Strickland in 2021 during auditions for a production of Legally Blonde at Project Challenge Playhouse. Grant was only 14 years old. Friends described him as quiet and socially awkward. Theater became the first place where he truly felt accepted. Nicole quickly recognized that vulnerability. At first, everything appeared normal. Parents saw a dedicated mentor helping a teenager discover confidence. Nicole offered extra coaching sessions. She volunteered rides. She stayed involved in his daily life. She became available whenever the family needed help. And slowly, prosecutors argue, those gestures transformed into something much darker. Investigators later described the relationship as a textbook pattern of grooming. Not sudden, not reckless, but gradual, emotional, and highly calculated. The process allegedly began with access. Nicole reportedly signed Grant out of school repeatedly for theater-related activities. She drove him to rehearsals. She arranged private time together through programs parents trusted completely. To outsiders, it looked responsible. To investigators, it looked strategic. Because grooming rarely begins with obvious criminal behavior. It often begins with dependency. A teenager starts believing one adult understands them better than anyone else. The adult becomes mentor, protector, emotional support system, and eventually gatekeeper of affection itself. And according to prosecutors, Nicole carefully built that position over time. One recovered message later became especially chilling to investigators. Nicole allegedly described herself as a very good actress, adding that those skills were useful. That statement mattered because prosecutors believe Nicole was not only manipulating a child, she was manipulating the entire environment around him. As her relationship with Grant deepened, Nicole reportedly shared stories about her failing marriage, family stress, and emotional struggles. Grant's mother began sympathizing with her. The family trusted her more deeply. Nicole stopped feeling like an outside authority figure and slowly became emotionally embedded within the household itself. That emotional integration created confusion. Boundaries became blurry. The relationship stopped looking professional long before many adults around them realized something was wrong. And prosecutors argue Nicole understood exactly how to use that confusion to her advantage. The case has also raised uncomfortable questions about gender bias. Many observers pointed out that if a 33-year-old male teacher had repeatedly isolated a 14-year-old girl, signed her out of school, driven her alone to private rehearsals, and maintained secret contact outside school hours, concerns likely would have emerged far earlier. But Nicole was a woman, and Grant was a boy. That combination created what some experts describe as a blind spot of suspicion. Even after warning signs appeared, many people struggled to interpret Grant as a victim. That reality became painfully clear later when Grant publicly stated, "I wasn't a man, I was a boy." The sentence spread rapidly online because it challenged one of society's oldest misconceptions about abuse involving male victims. Too often, teenage boys are expected to interpret exploitation as experience. They are told they should feel lucky. They are taught that emotional damage somehow matters less when the offender is female. Grant rejected that narrative publicly. He described confusion, depression, emotional dependency, and the feeling of losing part of his childhood before he was emotionally mature enough to understand what was happening. According to investigators, Nicole's control allegedly extended far beyond emotional attachment. When Grant's family eventually attempted to cut contact, prosecutors say Nicole adapted immediately. She allegedly purchased an Xbox specifically to continue secret communication with him online. The move shocked many people because it demonstrated persistence. The communication did not stop simply because boundaries were requested. Police later recovered approximately 12,000 messages from seized devices. 12,000. Investigators argue that number alone reveals the scale of the alleged manipulation. The messages reportedly included inside jokes, emotional language, pet names, and ongoing conversations maintained over years. But prosecutors also allege Nicole introduced Grant to alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana while they were alone together. Authorities believe those substances were not random recreational behavior. They allegedly became tools designed to weaken boundaries and normalize secrecy. Experts who study grooming patterns often describe this tactic as accelerated adulthood. A child is slowly pulled into adult behavior before they possess the emotional maturity to process the consequences. That distortion can create long-term confusion about consent, identity, and responsibility. And according to prosecutors, the effects on Grant became increasingly visible over time. School performance reportedly declined. Behavior changed. Family concerns intensified. Yet, despite those warning signs, adults and institutions allegedly failed to intervene effectively. That failure now sits at the center of multiple civil lawsuits connected to the case. Grant Strickland later filed lawsuits involving Anderson School District 5, Project Challenge Playhouse, and the Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities. One of the most alarming allegations concerns how Nicole allegedly checked Grant out of the Governor's School dormitory, despite not being a legal guardian. Critics immediately asked, how could that happen? Why were protocols not enforced? Why were so many unusual interactions normalized? The lawsuits argue that systemic failures allowed inappropriate access to continue far longer than it should have. And this is where the Nicole Callahan case expands beyond one individual accused of misconduct. It becomes a larger story about institutional trust. Schools, theater programs, churches, and mentorship organizations all depend heavily on emotional credibility. Communities survive because parents believe certain adults are safe around children. But cases like this expose how dangerous unchecked trust can become when accountability disappears. Some observers compared the investigation to other cases involving female educators accused of exploiting teenage boys, including the Laura Karen case in New Jersey. The details differ, but the underlying pattern remains disturbingly similar. Trusted women gaining emotional access to vulnerable boys, while surrounding adults struggle to interpret warning signs as dangerous. That comparison forced many parents to confront a painful realization. Predators do not always look frightening. Sometimes they look supportive. Sometimes they look compassionate. Sometimes they look exactly like the kind of mentor communities celebrate publicly. As the criminal investigation intensified, Nicole's public image began collapsing rapidly. She eventually resigned from her position. Authorities seized phones and digital records. Bond hearings revealed increasingly detailed timelines from prosecutors. Yet, even during court appearances, many people remained disturbed by Nicole's calm demeanor. Photographs showed her smiling, appearing composed, sometimes even confident. For critics, those moments symbolized emotional detachment from the damage prosecutors say she caused. Nicole's defense team emphasized that she had no prior criminal history. They argued she cooperated with investigators. They also revealed she was pregnant during the legal proceedings. But prosecutors argued none of those details erased the core allegations. Not the years of alleged manipulation, not the hidden communication, not the 12,000 recovered messages, and not the emotional impact described by Grant himself. Then, something unexpected happened. After Grant publicly shared his story, Safe Harbor, a nonprofit supporting abuse victims, reported a 38% increase in hotline calls from teenage boys in the region. Other boys were beginning to speak. That ripple effect may ultimately become one of the most important consequences of this entire case. Because beyond criminal charges and courtroom arguments, the Nicole Callahan investigation forced society into conversations many people have spent decades avoiding. Can female predators hide more easily behind trust? Do communities overlook warning signs when victims are boys? And how many children remain silent because they fear nobody will believe their pain? Today, Nicole Callahan faces 15 criminal charges across 2 counties while awaiting trial. Her teaching license has been suspended. Additional investigations remain ongoing. But regardless of how the legal process ultimately ends, one thing has already changed permanently. People are no longer looking at these cases the same way. And for many survivors who spent years believing their experiences would never be taken seriously, that shift may matter more than anything else.